This is the Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. To those of you who celebrate Easter, Feliz Navidad. On Friday, a two-seat American fighter jet was shot down over Iranian skies. The pilot and the man sitting behind him, called the Weapons Systems Officer, they successfully ejected from the plane. The pilot was rescued immediately, but the weapons officer, injured, was forced to evade enemy capture high up in the Zagros Mountains in southwestern Iran. He was behind enemy lines. A U.S. commando mission was immediately launched to retrieve this weapons officer before the Iranians, who placed a bounty on his head, offering money to tribespeople in the region to get him. America wanted to get our soldier first. The missing airman's survival kit included one 9mm pistol and a radio beacon that signaled CENTCOM that he was located 7,000 feet above sea level in near freezing weather alone in the mountains while commando units dropped into Iran. This was seen as a major blow to our military, a humiliation, puncturing a hole into Pete Hegseth's boast of American air superiority and dominance over the skies of Iran. We were told by Hegseth and by Trump that our B-52s could run bombing missions over Iran with their eyes closed, that the entire Air Force had been eliminated, Iran's entire Air Force had been eliminated, and that 90% of Iran's drones and missile launchers decimated. Donald Trump has been repeatedly assuring Americans that Iran's air defenses are in ruins. But his intelligence agencies are telling a different story, and Reuters has been doing tremendous reporting on this. Intelligence officers inside the Pentagon telling Reuters that Hegseth and Trump are inflating numbers. Gee, what a surprise. It is believed privately, or at least inside the Pentagon, that a little more than 50% of Iran's missile launchers and attack drones remain untouched, squirreled away in underground tunnels and deep within bunkers carved into mountains. This is, we've dropped about 13,000 bombs on Iran. Still, they reportedly have more than half of their munitions still intact. A general consensus has emerged inside America's intelligence community that Hegseth is misleading and misreading data showing that Iran's number of drone and missile attacks have dropped by 90% since the first day of the war. Now, that number, according to the intelligence insiders, they say, yes, that is correct. The number of drone and missile attacks have dropped 90%. We're not seeing swarms of drones or clusters of ballistic missiles falling from the sky like we did during the first couple of days of the war. But the intelligence agencies are secretly cautioning that Iran is playing the long game, now focusing on strategic hits, holding fire, using their weapons sparingly, and targeting infrastructure as well as U.S. air bases sprinkled across the Persian Gulf. There is growing concern that American bombing missions are not destroying the drone factories or the storage facilities housing the Revolutionary Guard's offensive weapons, which they seem to use sparingly. We still haven't seen their big guns, according to some intelligence analysts. Iran is hiding their big missiles and using drones and trying to get the biggest bang for the buck. More disturbing, the Revolutionary Guard has reportedly positioned more short-range missiles along the mountainous region overlooking Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, in preparation for an American ground assault. Much of the weekend, as you know, was taken up by the military attempting to retrieve that missing airman forced to eject from his F-15 Strike Eagle after it became the first American jet to be shot down over enemy skies since April of 2003. That was during the start of George W. Bush's illegal invasion of Iraq. That F-15 also became the 7th manned aircraft to have been destroyed since the war began on February 28th. What shook the Pentagon to its core on Friday was 2 U.S. airships getting destroyed on the same day, last Friday, both shot down over Iranian skies. The F-15 got taken out, and then a Warthog sent in to rescue the 2 crew members also got taken down. Then 2 Black Hawk helicopters were sent in to find that missing airman. They both got hit. 2 Black Hawk helicopters got hit, several crew members injured, and the 2 Black Hawks had to curtail their mission. They had to fly back, unable to rescue the missing airmen. Friday was not a good day for the U.S. military. Friday is when the war got real for most Americans. We had a soldier stuck behind enemy lines, 2 American jets destroyed, 2 Black Hawks unable to complete their rescue mission, all because the Iranian military, supposedly wiped out, was reminding the world that Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump are pathological liars, and whatever military successes they boast about belie their ignorance of who and what they're up against. Late Friday, if you were paying attention, it became apparent that we had to find that missing airman before Iran did, because the last thing we, the United States, needed was a hostage situation. The last thing we needed was President Trump, who has spat repeatedly in the face of international law. The last thing we need is a president who is currently threatening to commit massive numbers of war crimes on an industrial scale. The last thing we as Americans needed was Donald Trump being forced to warn Iran to obey the Geneva Conventions when it comes to the treatment of our captured airman. No, we lost the moral high ground. We torture. We are not signatories to the International Criminal Court. This war, by all American and international law, is illegal. It's an illegal war of aggression. We fire indiscriminately at unarmed civilians. We did it in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we're doing it repeatedly over the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific in that phony war against narco-terrorists. We do double taps. We take out a boat in the Caribbean, kill everyone on board with no proof they're narco-terrorists, no opportunity for them to surrender. And then when we see there are survivors, instead of rescuing them, we go back and, quote, kill them all, unquote. That was the order. Kill them all. Pete Hegseth said, I didn't give that order, but I would have. Kill them all. That is a war crime. So God forbid the Iranians had captured one of ours. Our legal and moral authority footing is riddled now with bone spurs. We can't stand on any of it. This is what happens, Pete Hegseth, when you prioritize lethality over legality. Those are Hegseth's own words as Secretary of Defense. Friday was a really bad day for Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. They had to find that missing airman. Up until Friday, the Pentagon could boast that 5 U.S. aircraft, yes, had been destroyed since the war began. Not good, but at least none of them had been taken out over Iranian airspace. But then everything changed on Friday. We had 2 manned aircraft shot down over Iran, plus 2 Black Hawks unable to perform search and rescue because of Iranian surface-to-air missiles that we were told had been decimated. Not a good look. Up until Friday, the Iranians had failed to shoot any American jets out of the sky. Now, 5 manned aircrafts had been destroyed before Friday. Now it's up to 7. Before Friday, 3 had been shot down over Kuwait from friendly fire from the Kuwaiti Air Force during the first days of the war. And then the 4th crashed in Iraq, not Iran, crashed in Iraq. Those 4 crashes were early in the war, and Iran had nothing to do with it. Then the Friday before last, the Iranians succeeded in destroying a $700 million AWACS sitting on the tarmac at Saudi Arabia's Prince Sultan Air Force Base. 12 U.S. soldiers were injured. This was a major blow to our military. How was that possible for an AWACS, one of only 15 in our entire fleet? How is it that an AWACS could be left sitting unprotected on the tarmac, exposed to Iranian drones? Where were the defensive missiles? It calls into question the leadership at the top and what kind of preparedness went into this unnecessary and illegal war. We are now discovering our U.S. air bases in Saudi Arabia are not safe for U.S. soldiers, many of whom are being ordered to work remotely inside Saudi apartment buildings and hotels. How is that possible that we cannot protect American soldiers on our air bases in Saudi Arabia? Why are we putting them up in hotels and apartments? Especially since it's against the law to hide U.S. soldiers inside hotels and apartments during wartime. That violates international law. Unfortunately, thanks to Trump and Hegseth, American soldiers are military targets right now, and international law forbids them from being housed among civilians. It turns civilians into collateral damage. One could argue that by taking American soldiers off U.S. air bases and forcing them to blend in with civilians, our American military is doing exactly what we accuse the Iranians and Hamas of doing, using civilians as shields. From day one, Pete Hegseth has been censoring the media, pretty much removing them from the Pentagon, despite a court order blocking that decision, but why obey a judge? Information about the war trickles in, and we're only allowed to hear about our military successes. The Pentagon is not forthcoming on anything that puts it in a bad light. But there are reports that the attack on Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, which took out a $700 million AWACS, was actually a lot worse than the Pentagon is willing to admit. There are some reports, not completely verified, but there are some reports that 2 to 3 refueling aircraft were either seriously damaged or completely destroyed in that attack, along with the AWACS. But the official count, at least according to the Pentagon, up until Friday, the official count had been 5 manned U.S. military aircraft destroyed. 1 by Iranian drones, that would be the AWACS in Saudi Arabia, and we're not going to count the 2 or 3 refueling tankers that may or may not have been destroyed. So that's 1, the AWACS, the $700 million AWACS in Saudi Arabia, and then 4 others, 3 shot down by friendly fire in Kuwait, and 1 that crashed in western Iraq early in the war. But there are probably more that Pete Hegseth is keeping secret, because this defense chief sees no value to bad news. In his mind, it only serves as propaganda that empowers the enemy. And so you end up sounding like Baghdad Bob, insisting the war couldn't be going any better. Which is why we're just beginning to learn that the March 3rd attack on the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh was far, far worse than anyone in the Pentagon is allowed to admit. Now, luckily, nobody was killed. 2 Iranian drones pierced Saudi Arabia's defensive shield, striking the diplomatic quarter in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and it hit the American embassy, striking offices where hundreds of Americans work. The attack took place at 1:30 a.m. local time, so it was empty. The Wall Street Journal spoke with several Pentagon officials, anonymous sources, who say that the building, the American embassy, it burnt for nearly 12 hours, with 3 floors of the embassy completely destroyed. But Hegseth ordered a lid on this story for fear it would make our military look weak and ill-prepared. It wasn't just the American embassy that got hit. There are now reports that the CIA station embedded inside that embassy was also destroyed. Again, had this attack taken place during working hours instead of at 1:30 a.m., hundreds of Americans would have been killed and injured. Trump is repeatedly assuring us that Israel and the United States, even now, even after Friday, Trump says we control the skies with abandon. We can hover without any fear of Iranian drones or surface-to-air missiles taking out our pilots. That is a verifiable lie. Because as you all know, on Friday, that F-15 was taken down over Iran, and then an A-10 Thunderbolt, also known as a Warthog, it was hit by Iranian missiles while it was performing search and rescue operations for the missing pilot, that munitions officer who was forced to eject from his downed F-15. The pilot was recovered immediately. The rescue Warthog went down near the Strait of Hormuz. The Warthog pilot was rescued inside Kuwait. So we went from 0 manned aircraft getting shot down over Iran to 2 manned aircraft on Friday taken out by Iranian missiles. And again, even more disturbing, 2 Black Hawk helicopters looking for the downed airman flying over the Zagros Mountains. They took enemy fire. Several soldiers inside the Black Hawks were injured. The Black Hawks suffered minor damage, but it forced them to curtail their rescue mission. They had to return home, leaving the downed munitions officer alone and forced to fend for himself. So, Friday night, early Saturday morning, how do we get him before Iran does? Reportedly, the CIA began spreading disinformation that we got him. We didn't have him, but the CIA wanted the Revolutionary Guard to believe we got him. Supposedly, that bought time for the Pentagon to put together a rescue mission. Now, think about this. I want you to think about this and think about sending in ground troops, okay? Hundreds of soldiers, American soldiers, swarmed the Zagros Mountains, clearing the perimeter with heavy munitions, and they were able to rescue that downed munitions officer. No American soldiers were injured, but 2 U.S. ops aircraft were damaged, and rather than leave them there for the Iranian military, we had to destroy them before our commandos returned safely to the base. Okay. Trump, of course, is spinning this into cause for celebration. Well, obviously, thank God the airman was rescued, right? But think about sending in ground troops, as I tell you that hundreds of U.S. soldiers had to fly into Iran to find one downed munitions officer. 2 aircraft on that mission were destroyed. I'm not talking about the 2 that were shot down that precipitated the commando raid. I'm talking about the mission to rescue this munitions office. We lost 2 aircraft on that mission. So it was a successful mission. But what if Trump deploys ground troops? You see, Americans right now don't have the stomach for a captured pilot to be held hostage. We don't have the stomach for that. But if Donald Trump commits ground troops, we will very quickly get hardened to our soldiers being captured and killed, pilots held hostage. Suddenly, it won't be a front page story because it will be ordinary. If we have boots on the ground, the resources will not be there to send hundreds of commandos into the Zagros Mountains to find one downed airman. That's how war works. At first, every American life is precious. We sweat every captured soldier. But like Donald Trump's lies and his war crimes, eventually they're too many to count. And so we become hardened to the brutal realities of war. Trump couldn't wait to say, we got him. Saturday night, we got him after they rescued the munitions officer. He called it one of the most daring search and rescue operations in U.S. history. Really? Really? So which one is it? Either the Iranian military has been decimated, as you told us during your speech last week, or it hasn't been decimated. If you've eliminated Iran's ability to wage war, how daring could that rescue mission possibly be? Or maybe you're a liar, Donald Trump. Maybe you're losing this war and the Iranian military outsmarted you, which isn't too hard to do. Maybe you're running out of munitions and political capital. Either way, doesn't matter. Trump is planning to use this good news as an opportunity to hold a press conference Monday to boast about U.S. air dominance over the Iranian skies. Doesn't sound like the truth to me. Trump already calling Saturday's rescue flawless. We lost 2 military aircraft. That's your threshold for flawless? Again, he said this proves that the United States has complete and total air dominance and superiority over the Iranian skies. And then he says, but our military did a tremendous job rescuing the munitions officer when they came under incredibly intense fire from the enemy. Which one is it? Have we broken their army? Because if we broke their army, then our soldiers should not be coming under incredibly intense fire from the enemy when we rescue a munitions officer who got blown out of the sky by Iran's decimated military. While American military performed search and rescue, Israel paused its bombing campaign, but immediately after he was found, Israel resumed its pounding of Iran, hitting 120 targets in 24 hours. Israel claims to have taken out several facilities housing drones, ballistic missiles, and key components to Iran's surface-to-air missile defenses. Israel not winning. Less safe today than it was on February 28th. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard launched wave after wave of drone and missile attacks over the weekend, targeting key infrastructure in the Gulf and Israel. Attack drones took out a petrochemical plant in Abu Dhabi. A desalination plant in Kuwait was destroyed. Water is the precious commodity in the Persian Gulf. In Bahrain, missiles took out storage tanks holding petroleum. And twice in fewer than 2 weeks, a refinery in Haifa, Israel, got struck by Iranian missiles. That refinery is back up and running. Trump has no idea what he's doing or why. Ever since Vietnam, the golden rule set forth by Colin Powell was never send American troops into harm's way without a clear and defined mission. Let me repeat, the lesson from Vietnam was Colin Powell's golden rule. Never send American troops into harm's way without a clear and defined mission. Never send American troops into harm's way without a clear and defined mission. The first Gulf War, by some accounts, was a success because it had a clear and defined mission, and George Herbert Walker Bush stuck to it. Iraq invaded Kuwait. Bush 1 said, "This will not stand. We're going in to remove Iraq from Kuwait." Doesn't matter that before the invasion, our ambassador, I think her name was April Gillespie, I'm not sure, leave a comment. I think it was April Gillespie, our ambassador to Iraq, before the invasion, told Saddam Hussein that America would be fine if he invaded Kuwait. But the point is, I was against that war. But the point is, Bush, the father, who was a fighter pilot during World War II, who got shot down, he had a clearly defined mission. He obeyed the golden rule set forth by Colin Powell. Never send American troops into harm's way without a clear and defined mission. After Bush 1 was able to extirpate Iraq from Kuwait, the United States, for all intents and purposes, pulled out of the Persian Gulf. Well, or at least ended the war there. We have about 50,000 troops. Now we have about 75 since the war started, but we've kept about 50,000 soldiers in the Persian Gulf. The rap against the first Bush was he didn't take out Saddam Hussein. But he said, that wasn't my mission. The rap against George Herbert Walker Bush was he didn't protect the Kurds in Iraq. He abandoned the people of Iraq and left them under the iron grip of Saddam Hussein. But the first Bush said, this mission has one purpose: to remove Saddam Hussein from Kuwait, make sure he doesn't invade Saudi Arabia so that we can keep the oil flowing. Now, his son, his idiot son, and Donald Trump have violated the golden rule, which is never send American troops into harm's way without a clearly defined mission. Both Bush and Trump changed the nature of their missions. George W. Bush first lied and said, we have evidence of weapons of mass destruction, and they attacked us on 9/11. 2 lies. And then he said, we have to fight them there, so we don't have to fight them here at home. And when nobody believed that, he said, we're spreading democracy through the Middle East. None of that was true. He did not have a clear and defined mission. Didn't know. They thought you topple Saddam Hussein, democracy just bubbles to the surface. And boy, are they stupid. Trump has no clearly defined mission for this illegal war of choice. First, he told us Iran is 2 weeks away from a nuclear bomb. A lie, which we all know they discontinued their nuclear weapons program 23 years ago. His own intelligence agencies not only told Trump this, but they also told Congress that openly. Why was Iran not allowing Rossi, the UN weapons inspector, in to see their 60% enriched uranium? The same reason Saddam Hussein, who didn't have weapons of mass destruction, played around with the weapons inspectors. Iran wanted people to think they had weapons of mass destruction so America wouldn't invade. But Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program. Yes, it enriches uranium up to 60%. They don't need a nuclear weapon. They can shut down the Strait of Hormuz. So there's been no clearly defined mission. Trump is going to send, hopefully not, but he's maybe planning, if he listens to Lindsey Graham, to send American troops into harm's way with no mission. We know there's no weapons program, nuclear weapons program. And then they say, Iran won't negotiate. Another lie. We were negotiating with Iran on a Thursday, and early Saturday morning, Trump started bombing them. And the same thing happened in June of last year. We were negotiating, and then Trump decided he wanted to bomb. And of course, the big lie that Trump keeps telling is, I launched the bombing campaign on February 28th to topple the Iranian regime, even though he was told before the bombing began that the regime would only grow stronger if you bomb Iran, and it has. Trump has no idea what he's doing or why. So we get a massive jumble of words. Trump is giving us a poorly written song where the singer's asking you, just listen to the music, listen to the energy. Don't pay attention to the lyrics because the words make no sense. The regime, the Iranian regime, according to all estimates, stronger today than it was when the bombing campaign began. Why? Well, for 37 days, 864 hours, all of Iran has been without internet. The entire nation has been forced to endure an information blackout, making it impossible for opposition leaders inside Iran to mobilize. And Israeli intelligence told Netanyahu that if they mobilize, they would be slaughtered. That didn't stop Netanyahu from delivering a speech in Farsi urging the Iranian people to rise up, knowing they'd be slaughtered. Well, the internet is shut down, they can't communicate, and they can't share information with Iranian citizens on how poorly the war is going for the Iranian leadership. And it is going badly for the Iranian leadership, but with the internet down, it's hard for word to get out. If you live in Iran, you don't need the internet to know this war is not going well. But when you're being attacked by America, you're not going to blame the regime anymore. You're going to blame America or Israel. And the problem Trump is up against is he picked a fight with a country ruled by theocratic martyrs who find virtue in a good death. That's what makes them so difficult, if not impossible, to defeat. The more leaders you kill, the more hardliners emerge. And the hardliners are waiting for the afterlife. The sooner, the better. How do you defeat an army that wants to die? Massachusetts House Democrat Seth Moulton sits on the House Armed Services Committee. He's a combat veteran. He deployed 4 times to Iraq as a Marine. He said on Friday, Trump and Hegseth, quote, they don't know how to get out of this mess. It's starting to smell like Donald Trump is being told by the same people who told him this war would be over in a week. Those same people who promised him one and done, 1 week, we're out of there. Those same people are telling him we need to send in ground troops to free up the Strait of Hormuz. Lindsey Graham is saying take Karg Island. It is starting to smell like Trump, who is lashing out publicly, blaming NATO, blaming the UN, blaming Europe for his unilateral mistake. It's starting to smell like Trump has no good options. Now, there is a good option for the United States and the planet, but it's not a good option for Donald Trump. See, the best option right now is leave, declare victory, and leave with the Strait of Hormuz closed, and let Europe, Iran, the UN, the EU, China, and Russia figure out how to get Hormuz flowing again. That's the smartest move that will save the most lives and rescue the economy. It's not the best, not the best. But you see, there are no best moves, Donald, when you are responsible for the single biggest military disaster in American history. Israel will be furious if you declare victory and leave, and Trump will be humiliated. So will the United States, but we will not have spilled blood to seize the Strait of Hormuz. We would have saved lives. Yes, Iran, thanks to this unnecessary war, will emerge as a global superpower that proved it didn't need a nuclear weapon. It proved it can destroy the world just by shutting down the Strait of Hormuz, and there's nothing the world can do about it, which is why that deal that Obama, Russia, and Europe struck with Iran, I believe it was in 2015, was brilliant. Brilliant. Of course, Trump and John Bolton and Fox News said it was the dumbest move ever, and we need to do regime change in Iran. There will be a growing chorus if he does the right thing, which is declare victory and leave. There will be a growing chorus inside the United States to get off fossil fuel. Gee, imagine that. The midterms, if he stays or if he goes, are going to be, who knows, but I would assume a disaster, as voters will be once again reminded that Trump killed 1 million of us during his first term by crapping the bed with COVID. But if he leaves now and doesn't send in ground troops, that remains the smartest move for everybody except Trump. So he's not capable of making the smart move. Instead, he's going to solve this problem by injecting our bodies with bleach. That's what he's going to do. I hope he doesn't. He is probably going to commit massive war crimes on an industrial scale in a bombing campaign over Iran that will take out Iran's water and power, causing carnage not seen since yesterday. I think for the time being, he is going to just keep bombing and bombing and bombing. But the more he bombs, Iran will continue to promise that it will open the gates of hell onto the world. If he foolishly and illegally takes out Iran's power grid and water. Supposedly that's happening Tuesday, unless Hormuz opens up. These are war crimes. If he bombs the power grid, the water supply, well, the gloves are off. Iran will launch terrorist attacks wherever, and Trump then will once again promise to bomb them back to what he calls the Stone Ages. I think there was one Stone Age, but he says, I'm going to bomb you back to the Stone Ages. And then this thing spirals as Hormuz stays closed. Maybe the Bab el-Mandab Strait, right below the Red Sea, will be closed by the Houthis in solidarity with Iran. In that case, the Suez Canal gets completely shut down. And we're looking at what? We're looking at a military-industrial complex not equipped to fight an asymmetrical war. You know who can? Ukraine. They can produce 1 million suicide drones a year. There's no money in that. So we make Tomahawks, which cost about $3-4 million a pop. Since the war started 5 weeks ago, the Navy has gone through 25% of our Tomahawk missiles, and it takes 2 years to replenish them. So, how much longer can we keep bombing Iran? Israel's already rationing its defensive missiles, doesn't have enough, which means ground troops. He's going to hear, we can do this, sir, Mr. President. You will go down in history, sir, Mr. They will build pyramids honoring you. 5 weeks in, without sending in any ground troops, we're looking at 13 dead American soldiers, 365 injured, and we haven't committed ground troops yet. So wars are won not just with weapons. They're won when you're willing to sacrifice your treasure, your soldiers. Americans in poll after poll say no, they don't want that. The midterms are closer than anyone realizes, and Trump right now has a Republican Party that is looking at a washout. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but in order to take back Congress, Democrats only need to win 3 seats. The Senate, I don't think it's possible, but Republicans now, they have an advantage. They have more money than the Democrats, but internal polling shows there are a lot of Senate seats, Republican Senate seats, that could be flipped. But again, all you need is to win the House of Representatives. That's all you need. And then Trump is done. Trump is done. And so supposedly would be the war. So this war, because 400 million barrels of oil have been stripped from the marketplace so far, it's causing the price of crude oil to close, I believe, at $111 a barrel Friday. The cost of gas in the United States has jumped nearly 50% since Trump launched this illegal war. It's planting season here in the United States. Fertilizer has jumped 30 to 40%. Those prices, when you increase the cost of fertilizer 30, 40%, for most farmers, that's the difference between profit and loss. And believe it or not, believe it or not. There are also Americans who think beyond how this war is affecting their wallet. There are Americans who care about our troops, and we don't want to force them to kill innocent Iranians. Believe it or not, there are some Americans who don't like war. 1,607 Iranians have been killed since this war started, 3,531 injured, and those are conservative numbers. There are some of us here in the United States we're appalled as April 15th approaches and taxes are due. We're appalled that our money pays for these war crimes, and they are war crimes. This is an illegal war. Over the weekend, our missile struck a storage facility belonging to the Red Crescent in Iran. According to the World Health Organization, we've taken out 20 hospitals and medical research facilities inside Iran, including the Pasteur Institute in Tehran. The Pasteur Institute is a key player fighting infectious diseases in Iran. It manufactures vaccines for all the diseases Bobby Kennedy Jr. insists can be prevented by eating more celery. Believe it or not, there are some Americans who are not turned on by Trump and Hegseth's swagger. We are sickened by Donald Trump when he celebrates the destruction of one of the tallest and most important bridges in the Middle East, that being the B1 bridge in Karaj, Iran. Taking out bridges, war crime. 8 were killed, 95 injured. When you do all those things, when you commit those war crimes, it rings especially hollow when our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, who himself has presided over the largest cut to humanitarian aid in American history, it rings hollow when Marco Rubio calls Iran immoral for closing the Strait of Hormuz. Immoral. Marco Rubio talking about morality. One of the lessons Trump taught us during his first administration, and we've been forced to relearn it, one of the lessons Trump taught us is that things can get bad really quickly. See, Trump is really creative when it comes to destruction. He has no idea, however, as to what to do during a crisis, especially one of his own making. In The Art of War, and I learned this first from Tony Soprano. I'm not going to pretend I'm more illiterate than I am, but I remember this quote from Tony Soprano, and then I looked it up. So I don't want you to think I'm trying to, but Tony Soprano said this, and then I checked it out. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu, but what did Tony Soprano call Sun Tzu? He had a funny name for him. Leave a comment. One of my sons would know. He called him something else. In The Art of War, Sun Tzu wrote, quote, "If your opponent is of choleric temper, easily infuriated, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak so that he may grow arrogant." It's all in chapter 1. Sun Tzu writes, "There are 5 dangerous faults which may affect a general. A hasty temper is the third, which can be provoked by insults." Iran, the United States, and our military could find, according to Sun Tzu, no bigger fool than Donald Trump to lead our troops into battle. Sun Tzu and Tony Soprano said it best. It's not just that Trump is stupid, that he doesn't know what he doesn't know. He's a paranoid schizophrenic with delusions of grandeur who's hallucinating. Having never served in the military, Donald Trump says openly, "I know more than the generals." He thinks what works with the mental defectives he surrounds himself with, he can only be around emotional and intellectual cripples. He thinks what works on them will work on the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. But they're not Michael Cohen or Mark Meadows or Marco Rubio or Tom Tillis, the senator from North Carolina. They won't bend to your death threats the same way Tom Tillis of North Carolina did. Tom Tillis could have prevented Pete Hegseth from becoming defense secretary. All he had to do was vote no. But he couldn't handle the death threats. See, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, they're not I'm not saying they are mental defectives, but they're not your kind of mental defective. They're not intellectual lightweights that only you can surround yourself with, Donald Trump. They're not worried that you're going to scream at them or call them stupid. Like anyone with any semblance of self-respect or intellectual rigor, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard knows Trump is physically, intellectually, and emotionally broken, and of course, spiritually broken. And that is why every time Trump gives one of his ultimatums and he doesn't follow through with it, every time Trump threatens to commit war crimes on an industrial scale, Iran knows it's winning. We know this. We learned this in the schoolyard. If you're strong, you don't need to tell people you're strong. Or if you're rich, you don't need to tell people you're rich. If you're smart, you don't need to keep telling people you're smart. It makes you look stupid, weak, and poor, which Trump is. Now, he did make some money since returning to the Oval Office illegally. It's illegal, but he entered the Oval Office broke. It will disappear after he leaves, if he leaves. And when you, Donald Trump, make threats, you sound weak, especially when you don't follow through with those ultimatums. And when you curse, it means you've lost control of your vocabulary, which means you've lost control of your mind. FDR, John F. Kennedy Jr., Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, never had to say, "Open the effing Strait," unquote, but he used the F word, "I won't." Trump literally used the F word, "Open the effing Strait, you crazy bastards. Oh, you'll be living in hell. Just watch." He said, "You have until Tuesday." He said, "Tuesday will be power plant day, bridge day, all wrapped up in one. There will be nothing like it," unquote. So Tuesday now, he gave them 10 days, 8 days ago. He said, "Open up the Strait of Hormuz or I'm going to destroy your infrastructure." He said, "Now I'm giving you until until Tuesday." What is that? The 6th, the 7th? You think he's going to keep that promise? You think Iran is going to open up the Strait of Hormuz on Tuesday? And if they don't, you think he's going to bomb them into extinction, take out all their infrastructure? Remember during his first term, every week was Infrastructure Week? Every week on a Monday started with the White House announcing that the president will unveil his big program to rebuild America's crumbling infrastructure, and every week a new crisis bubbled to the surface, and Infrastructure Week was put on the back burner. And since this war began, every week is Infrastructure Week. Trump promises to destroy Iran's entire infrastructure, and every week he pushes it back. Now, he is using our bombs. He's committing war crimes with our bombs, bombing hospitals. He is bombing schools, research facilities. Close to 90,000 civilian buildings have been hit in Iran since Trump and Netanyahu began their illegal bombing campaign on February 28th. I have no doubt he's going to attack bridges and some power plants. I have no doubt he will plunge Iran into more darkness. But that will keep the Strait of Hormuz shut forever. I don't think he's going to create, well, I don't know. Trump gave Iran 48 hours. That means they have until Tuesday. And then he says it's unrestricted war, as opposed to what has been going on now. Leave a comment. Does anyone think Iran is going to open up the Strait of Hormuz on Tuesday? Do you think Iran responds to threats? Especially since the world has already turned against the United States. Nobody asked for this war other than Trump, Netanyahu, and maybe Saudi Arabia, but we're not even sure about that. We're not sure about Saudi Arabia. We are seeing mass demonstrations around the world, some protesting the war in Germany, London, Germany, of course, Yemen and Iraq. But we're also seeing social unrest from the spike in oil prices. Workers in Pakistan and the Philippines are blaming their own governments for the cost of fuel, and they are demanding help, financial help. It's why we're seeing a frantic push by leaders in Egypt, Pakistan, and Oman to find an end to this war. And it's not because the leaders of Egypt, Pakistan, and Oman are terrified only of Iran. They're terrified of their own people. When the price of bread goes up, governments fall. I think the same applies to the price of oil because food prices are jumping 30, 40%. The leaders in the Middle East and around the world are terrified of social unrest. And that includes some of the leaders here in the United States. Not Trump. He welcomes social unrest. He tried to trigger that in Minnesota. He wants a reason to declare the Insurrection Act. But he's a mental defective. There are Republicans, also mental defectives, but they are terrified when they see gas now averaging $4.10 a gallon. That's nationwide. In California, a gallon of gas is up to $6, and it's not summer yet. It's not summer yet. You can drop all the bombs you want on Iran. If they don't open up Hormuz, most Americans are going to say, ouch. As you know, 20 to 25% of the world's oil passes through Hormuz. So as Trump blames NATO, Europe, for not helping him open Hormuz, telling Great Britain, literally, grow some courage, send in your Navy, NATO, Europe, they are openly mocking Donald Trump. France is saying, this is not our war. Italy and Spain refuse to allow American fighter jets to use their bases. Britain is saying, yes, we will help open Hormuz, but only until there's peace. Donald Trump, the isolationist, is completely isolated. And to make matters even worse, Europe and Japan are making side deals with Iran to allow their tankers to pass through Hormuz. 70% of all the ships passing through Hormuz right now are either Iranian, Russian, or Chinese. And India is buying some of that oil. European countries are quietly making deals. So are Asian countries. I believe a French, I'm not sure, but I was told a tanker heading for France was allowed through Hormuz. We are beginning to see Hormuz opening a wee bit. It's now at 5%. It was completely shut down, and now it's flowing 5% capacity. So with all that, Trump's 2027 budget proposal was officially submitted to Congress on Friday. Presidents submit budget proposals. All budgets flow from the House of Representatives. I know the Senate occasionally will try to get a budget when the House can't get one together. The Senate tries. But according to the Constitution and according to tradition, all budgets flow from the House of Representatives. The president submits his budget proposal. That kicks off budget negotiations, and then it's just a proposal. Now, depending on how much influence the president has with Congress, his proposal will either be ignored or used as a template, but it's just a proposal. He has now officially asked Congress to boost military spending to $1.5 trillion for fiscal year 2027. That constitutes a 42% increase in military spending over 2026. It would be the largest increase in military spending since World War II. Well, this is World War Trump. If he's at it, if he won't declare victory and go home and let Europe figure out how to open Hormuz, this is World War Trump. So Iran spends a little under $30 billion a year on defense. Trump wants to give the Pentagon an additional $445 billion. That increase alone accounts for 4.5% of our entire economy. So we spend a little under $1 trillion on defense in 2026. Trump is bumping it up to about $1.5 trillion. It's a 42% increase. But that won't cover the war in Iran. He's asking for $200 billion. He's asking for a war supplemental to pay for the war. That's how it works. We fought 20 years in Afghanistan. We fought in Iraq for, 8 years? Yeah, about 8 years. That wasn't covered by the Pentagon's budget. Those were all paid for by war supplementals. So let's be clear here. He is asking for $1.5 trillion for defense for fiscal year 2027. But the war in Iran? Well, that's going to cost you extra. That's going to cost you $200 billion extra. It's like trying to buy a car. Oh, you wanted a steering wheel. Oh, well, that's going to cost you. That's wheels. You didn't say you wanted wheels. But I just signed everything. I know, but you didn't tell me before you signed that you wanted wheels. We are bleeding cash in the Persian Gulf. So far, it's estimated that the war has cost United States taxpayers anywhere between $1 to $2 billion a day. That's without ground troops. That F-15 Eagle that got shot down on Friday, the one where we had to send in hundreds of commandos and airships to rescue one munition expert. That one F-15 cost $31 million, and the rescue mission, we lost 2 aircraft. I don't know, they haven't told us what kind of special ops aircraft. So you send in ground troops, that kind of stuff happens, what, every week, if we're lucky? So $200 billion for the war supplemental, that $200 billion will last, what, 100 days? And then Trump and Hegseth will come back for more. And they want $1.5 trillion for a war supplemental. I'm sorry, $200 billion for the war supplemental and $1.5 trillion for the Pentagon's budget on top of that, for the Pentagon. So what kind of money are we talking about here? The budget, the U.S. federal budget, is about $7 trillion a year, give or take. And half of that is discretionary spending. The other half is non-discretionary. I'll go over that in a second. So Trump's budget calls for $185 billion to build Trump's Golden Dome missile defense shield, to knock incoming out of the sky, because we know how well that's working in the Persian Gulf and Israel. 92% success rate in Israel. All you need is one to pass through. And these interceptors cost $3 million, and they're taking out $20,000 drones. Doesn't make economic sense. So he wants to spend $185 billion to build what he calls the Golden Dome missile defense shield. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the Golden Dome will eventually cost more than $500 billion over the next 20 years. Our soldiers will be given a 5 to 7% pay raise, and $65.8 billion is earmarked for what is called a golden fleet of heavily armed Trump-class battleships. They're called Trump-class battleships. That's what they're being called. Trump-class battleships. How do we pay for it? Trump is planning to cut all non-defense spending by 10%. So I know nobody follows this, and I didn't until, but nobody pays attention to this stuff. It's boring, depressing. We can barely look at our credit card statement. Why would we look at America's credit card statement? So it is everything. The budget is everything. How you spend money as a society is a reflection of what you value. There is discretionary and non-discretionary spending. Non-discretionary means you have no choice. You have no discretion in the matter. It's by law, you have to spend money to keep Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare. Those are the untouchables. I think the VA is included in non-discretionary. And discretionary spending means Congress has discretion. They can decide. They have freedom to decide what to spend that money on. So Trump's budget allows for $2.2 trillion in total discretionary spending. I believe all in the U.S. budget is about, I think it's $6 trillion, $7 trillion a year. So I don't know how he comes up with $2.2 trillion for just discretionary spending. Believe it or not, military spending, defense spending, believe it or not, is considered discretionary. It's not considered non-discretionary. It's not in the same bucket as Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. But it might as well be considered non-discretionary because there's no way any Congress is going to wake up one morning and say, let's cut funding for our Pentagon. So it's not in the same bucket as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And paying interest on the debt is you have to pay interest on the debt. That's non-discretionary. And I think it costs about 10% interest. 10% of our budget goes towards paying down our debt. Paying the interest on our debt. Not tapping into the principal, just paying the interest on the debt, 10%. So the military used to, up until 2027, if Trump has his way, but traditionally the military took about half of all discretionary spending. Trump is planning to spend $1.5 trillion on defense. He's allocated $2.2 trillion for discretionary spending. Again, the military is discretionary spending, so that leaves $700 billion for the rest of us. In other words, Trump wants 70% of our discretionary spending to be handed over to the Pentagon. But if you want to fight a war in Iran, that's going to cost you. That's $200 billion for about 100 days. Then it's going to cost you some more. So how do you pay for it? It means massive cuts to education, housing, and the environment. Trump, during an Easter prayer service last week, after he released the budget, said, we have to return daycare, Medicaid, and Medicaid entirely to the states. He said, we can't do it, can't afford it. He said, it's not possible for us to take care of daycare, Medicaid, Medicare. They can do it on a state basis. The focus must be military protection. Well, you know who can do it on a state basis? The states Kamala Harris carried. Those are the giver states. Trump's base cannot do Medicaid, Medicare, state by state. They can't do food stamps without the federal government. But these are the same people who vote for Trump, who vote for Republicans, who say the federal government is the enemy. And they're taker states. They take more from the federal government, especially in terms of Medicaid and Medicare and food stamps, than they pay in. So, yeah. Trump's budget proposal calls for massive cuts to FEMA's disaster relief. He said this is the last year for FEMA. He wants the states to do disaster relief. He's calling for massive cuts to funding of new teachers, and he doesn't want to spend money on curing diseases. He would eliminate energy subsidies for the poor and working class, no longer helping the working poor and the poor to pay for heat or air conditioning. Freeze to death. Die from heat stroke. And of course, the Environmental Protection Agency would be cut in half. He wants to eliminate it. Health and Human Services would see a 12.5% decrease. Money for weapons, not for disease. Tells you what your values are, right? $15 billion cut from investments in renewable energy. These are the Biden-era subsidies. Cuts in subsidies for battery productions. And he declared war on cultural Marxism. That's what Russell Vought, his budget director, called it, and this is how he justified it. He said, we're declaring war on cultural Marxism. We're suggesting massive budget cuts to marginalized groups like the LGBTQ community and minorities. And here's how he's going to save us money. There's other ways he's going to save us money. And this is brilliant. He's calling for TSA to be privatized. All the people who go through your bags at the airport wants to privatize TSA. Not because it would benefit his donors. We all know that if you were to turn TSA over to a contractor, it would save us money. And it would be better. There would be no lines, because history has shown when we turn government jobs over to the private sector, they always do it more efficiently and for less money. I believe that. Would you like to see me eat my own feces now? I mean, how does somebody say in this day and age that privatizing any government service will make it more efficient and save money? Maine Republican Senator Susan Collins chairs the Senate Committee on Appropriations, that is the Budget Committee, essentially. She's got a difficult reelection campaign in November, and she said these proposed cuts from the White House will be dead, she said, on arrival. When they arrive on Capitol Hill, these proposed cuts from Donald Trump will be dead on arrival. But it being Easter, I have no doubt those cuts will be resurrected. This is the Republican Party built on the lie that they are the party of Christ. In violation of the First Amendment, Pete Hegseth has been holding Protestant-only prayer services at the Pentagon. During one that he held last month, he once again called on Jesus to, quote, pour out your wrath on the enemy, and asked Jesus for, quote, overwhelming violence of action, unquote. That's the Jesus I know. Some people who have studied, however, the teachings of Christ, they told the New York Times that Hegseth is coming across a tad feral and bloodthirsty with his interpretation of the Gospels. According to the New York Times, Pete Hegseth is constantly telling our soldiers, we are fighting for Jesus. But he won't tell us who's Jesus. Apparently, Jesus is not universal. Hegseth canceled the Catholic Mass scheduled for Good Friday at the Pentagon, and then held what was billed as a Protestant-only Good Friday service inside the Pentagon's Memorial Chapel. No, it's not legal. It's a violation of the First Amendment. A Pentagon employee told the New York Times canceling the Catholic Mass was a direct message that Catholic soldiers, quote, ain't welcome in Hegseth's Pentagon. You're looking at a picture of Pete Hegseth praying at one of his Pentagon services, which are against the law. This one was held alongside Moscow, Idaho pastor Doug Wilson, who has some really loving views about Jews and Muslims. Doug Wilson, Pastor Doug, thinks, or not only thinks, but has declared America is a Christian nation. He said Muslims should not be allowed to hold elective office or work in our government. That would be Pastor Doug, who was leading an officially sanctioned prayer service at the Pentagon alongside self-avowed Christian nationalist Pete Hegseth, whose body is littered with neo-Nazi tattoos, symbols from the Crusades. Pastor Doug doesn't believe everyone is sufficiently Christian. Like Catholics, According to Pastor Doug, he has called for banning Catholic Mass in general. Like, Catholic Mass should not be held on any public grounds or anywhere, which is why the Pentagon, under Pete Hegseth, had no problem officially canceling the Good Friday Catholic Mass, but went ahead with the Protestant Mass. One anonymous source inside the Pentagon told the New York Times that canceling the Mass was, quote, so ridiculous. How about illegal and dangerous? Whose Jesus is Pete Hegseth praying to? He has repeatedly urged Americans in this time of war to drop to one knee and pray for victory, quote, in the name of Jesus. Well, Archbishop Timothy Broglio heads the Pentagon's military's Catholic Archdiocese. So if you're a Catholic soldier, Archbishop Timothy Broglio is your guy. The Archbishop said last week that Hegseth's attempts to frame the Iran war as something Jesus would justify is, quote, a little bit problematic. Yeah, a little bit problematic. Like the Crusades were a little bit problematic. The Archbishop said Jesus was for peace. The Archbishop said war must always be viewed as the last resort. But we know Hegseth is feral and bloodthirsty, couldn't wait to bomb Iran. And those alleged narco-terrorists in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific that he's killing, he celebrates. It's not like, we had to do it. It's like, yeah, I'm a man. I'm a man who abuses women, who had to pay one woman $50,000 so she'd stop accusing him of rape. Pete Hegseth's own mother put into writing, you are a serial abuser of women, and I'm sick of it, unquote. That's Pete Hegseth's own mother. Calls him an abuser of women. Something ain't working properly. His missile isn't launching properly, if at all. So, directly challenging Pete Hegseth's attempt to link Jesus to war-making, Archbishop Broglio said none of this would be sponsored by the Lord. Does the Lord sponsor? Maybe I wonder if the Lord would sponsor this show. Well, it's not just the Archbishop. Without mentioning Hegseth by name, the American-born Pope Leo, who I adore, he said last Sunday, not Easter Sunday, but the week before Sunday, he said that Jesus does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war. Jesus rejects them. And that was a veiled reference to Pete Hegseth constantly invoking Jesus in order to kill Muslims. So Pope Leo said, quote, Chicago's own Pope Leo said, Jesus does not listen to the prayers of those who wage war, but rejects them. So, of course, the White House accused the Pope of attacking our soldiers. That's what these cowards do. They hide behind our troops. No, the Pope wasn't attacking our soldiers. He was trying to save them from spilling unnecessary blood in Iran. The Pope was singling out Hegseth and going after the cowards who send our soldiers into battle in the name of Jesus. Pope Leo, in the past month, Pope Leo has warned repeatedly of people like Hegseth, without mentioning them by name, people like Hegseth, according to the Pope, throughout history have perverted the gospel to justify actions that fly in the face of Jesus's teachings. We all know that. We all know that. This is why people like Hegseth have crosses tattooed to their bodies. This is why the Trump White House, all the women are wearing crosses around their necks, because it's the same reason Donald Trump says he's smart. Mike Johnson calls himself a Christian for the same reason Donald Trump insists he's a billionaire. Thanks to Pete Hegseth, the number of military chaplains has been slashed from 200 to 30. Hegseth ridiculed the chaplain corps. He said, quote, "They are nothing more than therapists." Nothing more than therapists, says the man in so desperate need of one. The White House was forced to take down video of the White House Easter service when several of Trump's closest religious advisors compared Trump to Jesus. Welcoming his religious supporters to the White House for the Easter service earlier in the week, Trump said, quote, "On Palm Sunday, Jesus entered Jerusalem as crowds welcomed him with praise, honoring him as king." And then Trump said, "They call me king now. Can you believe it?" His spiritual advisor, Paula White Cain, then got up and spoke. And once again, she compared Trump to Jesus. She said Trump was betrayed and arrested and falsely accused, quote, "in a familiar pattern that our Lord and Savior showed us." She added that Trump rose up like Jesus after nearly losing his life when he was shot, and that, quote, "no one has paid the price like you have paid the price," unquote. Well, that White House event was on the internet, on the White House website, but then the White House took it down. Video was deleted, but I was able to salvage this. So I'm going to play this twice. This is Donald Trump welcoming his religious supporters to the White House. And this is him revealing what he thinks of Christians. So I'm going to play this twice. Here we go.
So you're Christians, but you're very smart and you have great common sense. And our country has come a long way.
Okay, let me just play that again. But you're Christians. Here we go.
So you're Christians, but you're very smart and you have great common sense. And our country has come a long way.
So you're Christians, but you're very smart, right? Let's hear it again. So this is what he thinks of Christians.
So you're Christians, but you're very smart and you have great common sense. And our country has come a long way.
That is what he thinks. So you're Christians, but you're very smart. He thinks Christians are stupid. They're not. Just the Christians in that room who Trump called very smart. They're stupid, they're dangerous, and they're not Christian. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you so much for listening to this show. I'm going to try to do a show at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. It was great to meet some of you. I played a clip, a highlight from the last show Saturday night, and we turned it into like a little event on YouTube, and I was in the chat room talking while the clip played. It was fun to talk to some of you. When we have time, we're going to try to do a town hall. I've been overwhelmed, as we all have been. Please leave a comment if I made any mistakes. What did Tony Soprano call Sun Tzu? He referred to Machiavelli as Prince damn it. There was a perfume. Anyway, I'm babbling here. Leave a comment. The minute I sign off, I'm going to remember what Tony Soprano called the Sopranos. And I was walking the streets of New York, and I saw Uncle June's assistant, who got shot when he was jogging in episode 8, season 1. I saw him on the street, and I shook his hand. I got to meet somebody from The Sopranos. Okay. Subscribe, like this episode so I remain in your feed, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. I read all your comments. If I made any mistakes, let me know in the comment section. I think that covers everything. Thank you. I'm going to try to do a show at 6 p.m. Tuesday night at 6. Thank you.